Professor Michael Sandel is the Anne Robert M. Bass Professor of Government at Harvard University. I was a graduate student there. I never took his course, but he is the equivalent of Sachin Tendulkar on the Harvard campus, which you all know what that really means, in the sense that I don't refer to his salary, obviously. I refer to his popularity as a rock star on campus because of his course on justice. He has taught this course for over 20 years. He has taught at Harvard since 1980, so he's been there for 32 years, and he's taught for justice, I think, for over 20 years there, which in sum total is about 15,000 students. And I believe this is the most popular course, or most widely taught course in the history of Harvard. So he's taught about, several orders of magnitude of students more than most faculty. He has also written widely on a majority of topics. His new book is out this year, which will be on what money can't buy, the moral limits of markets. In the past, he has also written on democracy's discontent, the limits of justice, public philosophy, essays on morality in politics, and the case against perfection, that is, on the ethics in the age of genetic engineering. He has also served on the President's Council for Bioethics. He's a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and he was also on the Council of Foreign Relations. He also has been awarded the Harvard-Radcliffe Phi Beta Kappa Teaching Prize. And he's also been recognized by the American Political Science Association in 2008 for a career of excellence in teaching. He's also given very famous lectures, such as the Tanner Lectures on Human Values at Oxford. He's lectured at Sorbonne in Paris. And in 2009, he gave the BBC Reith Lectures. And so he's sort of in the same company of Aung San Suu Kyi and Bertrand Russell and Robert Oppenheimer and several other important intellectuals of this world. In 2010, China Newsweek named him the most influential foreign figure of the year in China. He finished his undergraduate degree from Brandeis in 1975. He was a Rhodes Scholar, and he got his PhD from Oxford, from Balliol College in 1981, and since then he has taught at Harvard. And myth has it, and legend has it, maybe later on if somebody can ask him this question, that he is also the inspiration behind a character on The Simpsons. And he has also debated President Reagan when he was a high school student, I think he was 14 or 15 years old. And when President Reagan was the governor of California, he invited him, gave him a bag of jelly beans, and he came to his high school, and he debated him on stage. So he's been a public speaker for a really long time. And so hopefully today, in this rather intimate setting, you will see Michael Sandel in action. Just one final word of note is he has perhaps, in my limited opinion, perfected the Socratic method of teaching. That is, you'll see him mix his lectures up with a lot of questions and discussions and back and forth. So it doesn't even feel like a lecture. It feels like you're talking to him. And so it's very important that we all engage him as much as he engages us. And with that, what we'll do is we'll play a clip that's a promo for the class that he teaches at Harvard on justice. In fact, these lectures are now being aired on NDTV on Saturday night at 10 p.m. on NDTV Profit, and on Sunday morning on NDTV 24/7 at 10 a.m. So every week we have one episode or one lecture of his. So we'll show you a sample of him in action in class. And then he will get up here and he will teach us something new.
What's the right thing to do? That's a question I've asked thousands of students at Harvard University in my class, Justice. Would it be just to torture the suspect to get the information? Do you think that a person with a bad parent owes them less? Is it all right to steal a drug that your child needs to survive? My name is Michael Sandel, and over the years, thousands of students have joined me for an ongoing debate about the moral decisions we face in our everyday lives.
This is a course about justice, and we begin with a story. Suppose you're the driver of a trolley car. Nikolai, if you didn't think you'd get caught, would you pay your taxes?
I don't think so.
Do I think I should be able to bid for a baby? I'm not sure. It's a market. I mean,
in a situation that desperate, you have to do what you have to do to survive.
You have to do what you have to do.
You got to do what you got to do.
What do you say to Marcus?
I've never been in a class like this before, where they kind of ask you to really think and consider the moral dilemma. I've never had such a fun class in my life, you know?
We turn to the great philosophers of our past for answers.
Do you think Bentham is wrong to add up the collective happiness?
I don't think he's wrong, but I think murder is murder in any case.
Yeah, well, then Bentham has to be wrong. If you're right, he's wrong.
Okay, then he's wrong.
All right.
I'm right.
Thank you. Well done.
And we turn to the present to challenge the reasoning behind the moral choices we make every day.
I think that what happened in the past has no bearing on what happens today, and I think that discriminating based on race should always be wrong.
I just want to say that white people have had their own affirmative action in this country for more than 400 years. It's called nepotism and quid pro quo. So there's nothing wrong with correcting the injustice and discrimination that's been done to black people for 400 years.
Even effort depends a lot on fortunate family circumstances for which we can claim no credit. Raise your hand, those of you here who are first in birth order. I am too, by the way. Mike, I noticed you raised your hand.
Taking justice was really an eye-opening experience for me. Everything that you've thought of up to that point becomes questioned, becomes challenged.
The purpose of sex is, one, for its procreative uses, and two, for a unifying purpose between a man and a woman.
Your beliefs are your beliefs, and that's fine. But civil union is not marriage within the Catholic Church.
What is the right thing to do?
People have been arguing for millennia, really, and there's still not one definite answer. And in ways that makes philosophy impossible, but makes it beautiful at the same time, that we're still debating similar questions.
And the reason they're unavoidable, the reason they're inescapable, is that we live some answer to these questions every day.
And now, I have the chance to invite you to join us as Harvard opens its classroom to the world. All right. Well, thank you, Rohan, for that introduction. And thanks. Here, I'll put it on. And thank you for instigating this event and this visit and the NDTV showing of the Justice series. And I want to begin by thanking the entire Murthy family. Being here is it's a privilege to speak here and to engage with audiences and to learn from the reactions and the responses to the questions of justice. But it's also, on a personal level, it's really been, though this is only my second visit to India, and it's my first to Bangalore, it's felt almost like a homecoming because of the warmth of the Murthy family, and I really want to thank them on a personal level. We're an intimate group, so I'm not really going to give a lecture, and Rohan already said my lectures aren't really lectures anyhow. But I would like to engage you in a discussion about some questions of justice and fairness and meritocracy. A meritocracy is one vision of a just society.
though different people mean different things when they think of a meritocracy and whether or not it's fair. So let's come to that, but first let's begin with the discussion. And I hope those of you toward the back will be brave enough to come down and sit here, because I'm going to come down since our numbers are small enough to enable us to have a more intimate conversation. How many of you here are students? Well, we're all students in a certain way, but official card-carrying students. All right. And how many are teachers or professors of one kind or another? So that's a pretty sizable number. And what I'd like to do is to begin to hear your reactions to a case. It's a true case, a debate in Germany that took place a few years ago. Some of you may have read about it. Shortly after September 11th, when security became a very major concern, the German parliament passed a law that said that if a plane was hijacked by terrorists, and there was a risk they would use it as a weapon, as was done in September 11th, that the Air Force could shoot down the plane, even if it were a passenger plane with 200 people on board, to prevent it being used as a weapon, that plane. And this law was fiercely debated in Germany, and it was challenged before the Constitutional Court about whether this was permissible. Now, let's start with that law. If you were, let's suppose you were a member of a constitutional court deciding whether this law should be permitted or not, the shooting down of a passenger plane to prevent its being used as a weapon. How many would uphold that law, would favor the law? Raise your hand. Yeah. And how many would oppose it? How many would strike it down? It's pretty close, actually. It's a divided court. And those of you who would, let's start with those who would uphold it. What would be your reason? On what grounds? Yes? You can't shoot down innocents, and there might be 200 innocent people on the plane.
You can't write it off as collateral damage.
You can't write it off as collateral damage. Why? Because it's...
I mean, it's not. I mean,
well, it is.
Like you said, innocent people.
These are innocent people. So you can't deliberately shoot down a plane with innocent people. Yeah, what do you say?
You also can't ask innocent people to give up their lives for others, right? It's not really fair to them.
Right. Okay, all right. Yeah.
People were innocent up until the point that the plane got hijacked. Once the plane was actually hijacked and it now becomes a liability. It's unfortunate that the people are actually inside the plane. And the plane is going to crash, whether or not you shoot it down or not. Right. So I guess my point would be, let's bring it to a situation where, we can minimize the damage as much as possible.
So you said before the microphone reached you, you said something that people might find provocative. Those people were innocent up until the moment when that plane was hijacked.
Yes.
And then they ceased to be innocent?
They don't cease to be innocent. It's that's, what I'm trying to say is, we can't do anything about it anymore, right? As long as the innocence was concerned, we could have tried to prevent the hijacking from actually happening. Then, something could have been done about it. But after the hijacking has actually occurred, I don't think we can, change their situation. But we can definitely control the destiny of the people on the ground.
Yeah, so there may be 200 people, innocent people, whom you shoot down, but you might be saving thousands or tens of thousands on the ground. And it's a matter of numbers?
Yes, in a way.
If we assume that, like you said, the plane is going to crash whether or not we shoot it down,
right,
used as a weapon, then the actual number of people we save, who would otherwise be shot down, does not need to be more than the people on the plane, because they are, in our moral accounting, already dead either way, so to speak.
So even if only one person on the ground, well, wait, this is interesting. So even if there are 200 people on the plane, and let's say that plane is only going to crash in a field, and there's one farmer in the field who will die, then, even then, you would shoot down the plane.
Given the assumption that there is no other way, like that the people on board cannot be
because
saved.
the 200 plus the one farmer will die anyhow.
Yes.
201.
Yes.
So you might as well save one life and kill those 200. Yes. So you don't even require a big calculus, the 10,000. One will do.
Yes.
On 9/11,
yeah,
if the Air Force had been tracking the hijacked plane, and it was clear to them that it was going in for the World Trade Center, then I think it would have been perfectly justifiable to shoot down the plane, innocent passengers and all. But that didn't happen.
But it didn't happen. But the German case was designed exactly to respond to that scenario, with that reasoning. Now, all right, so we've just heard defenders of shooting it down to save lots of people, or for that matter, to save one extra person, because the 200 would die. So those of you who were opposed, what do you say to that? What do you say?
One point which is not considered.
Yeah.
Sends a message out to the terrorists.
What sends a message?
Control.
Aha, if you shoot it down.
If you shoot it down, it gives a very clear signal to the terrorists that they are not in control.
And that's a good thing.
That's a good thing.
And that warrants shooting down a plane with 200 innocents.
Yes. It may prevent another 200 hijacks.
It might, though they seem willing to destroy themselves in the process anyhow. Go ahead.
And it was taken to Kandahar, and there were a lot of people on board, I think around 200 people. The Indian government then negotiated, and they wanted some terrorists who were in Indian jails to be released. The Indian government negotiated with the terrorists and released these terrorists, and they saved a lot of lives. But in the process, in the long run, if you have a look at what happened, a lot of these terrorists have now gone ahead and gone to Pakistan, and they have created havoc. They've masterminded these plots and killed so many people. So I don't think it was right to have negotiated and let these few people go and save the lives of these 200 people for the thousands of, I'm sure, Indian people, Pakistanis, Afghans, US soldiers who have then gone and died thanks to these guys then going and masterminding these terrorist plots.
So part of your reasoning seems to be that if you add up the havoc and the death and destruction that the released terrorists caused, it wasn't worth it.
It was just not worth it. Yeah. Because this is ongoing.
So 2 points. One is negate that. I had a friend on that plane, and I'm glad that he was saved. So if he had died, I would have felt miserable, number one.
Right. But wait, let me ask you about that. So you had a friend on the plane, you were glad he was saved. But do you think it was justified, all things considered, if more people died as a result?
Well, these are all speculations. When you say about the German law, that was my second point. You are only saying that they made a law. It's not that they shot anybody. And the law could sometimes be a deterrent. So there's a law on the road that if you jump the red light, you will get a fine.
Yeah.
If that law was not there, there'd be havoc on the road. But the law is there, and people don't kill each other on the road. So the law is the deterrent. So you're making an assumption that Germans were going to shoot down actually anybody. But just the threat and the law is actually the point.
All right, now I want to, there have been a lot of arguments just now in favor of the German law, but suppose I add one further fact. You know what the Constitutional Court decided in this case? What do you think? What would you guess?
Certain number of people.
They struck it down. They struck down the law, but on what grounds do you think?
No innocent life should be lost.
Right, we're right. And
every life is very, very important.
I think the state's duty to protect citizens. We don't know what exactly the terrorist state will do. The state is bound to protect those citizens too.
So they have to shoot it down. They should not shoot it down because they have to protect their own citizens on the plane.
Can the state itself make a law that will take life from the citizens it is meant to protect?
Right.
Definitely. I mean, they definitely know that they're going to take the lives of these citizens.
Yes.
Is that not would that not be against the Constitution of Germany in some sense?
Well, what they decided was against the Constitution of Germany was close to this idea of the state taking innocent life, even to save more lives, or the life of the extra one person, because the German Constitution says that human dignity is inviolable and must never be violated, and they reasoned that this law, or the act of shooting, would violate human dignity, even though it was for the sake of saving lives, saving more lives. And so they said that the principle of human dignity outweighed saving more lives. Now, that doesn't mean they're right, but it does suggest that there is, at least in the German Constitution, this principle of human dignity, and the notion that it's inviolable. This is connected to an idea of Immanuel Kant, a German philosopher, who says that even if you can save more lives rather than fewer, you can't do it if it involves violating respect for human dignity. Human dignity and respect override morally, even saving more lives, 10,000 lives. So they would condemn shooting down even the plane going into the World Trade Center, that reasoning. Now, you may say, that's pretty stringent, that's pretty morally stringent, if even thousands of lives are at stake. But consider, Rohan, go ahead.
The German Constitution and law or legislature deem this to be true even when this hypothetical plane is heading towards the Chancellor's house.
Toward the Chancellor's house. Well, the law didn't specify the destination of the plane as a requirement.
If it did, if that is the case, then one can make the argument that this is a quote-unquote attack on democracy itself, and that human dignity outweighs democracy.
Aha. So if it were, so it's not to protect the Chancellor himself, but it's a symbol of democracy.
Yeah.
And in fact, the 9/11 hijackers precisely aimed at the key symbols of democracy on the one hand and of capitalism on the other, or of the West as they conceived it.
Right.
And so you're suggesting that maybe even the value of human dignity, important though it is, should be outweighed by an attempt to protect against an assault on democracy and its symbols.
No, actually, that's not my personal view.
Okay.
I'm just wondering out loud.
Whether that was there.
Yeah.
I think the point that Rohan made about putting democracy about human dignity makes sense, because democracy is about the dignity of a collection of people who have come together. So perhaps there is an argument to say that where the dignity of democracy is likely to be violated, perhaps it's worthwhile sacrificing an individual's dignity.
Yeah, but you don't think so?
why Germany should talk about this, what they have done in Hitler's time. What was the dignity at that time?
Well, it's actually related. No, it
Particularly
is
for
related.
Germany.
It's related in the following way.
Yeah.
The reason, now this is the post-war German Constitution, remember. The reason they established in the Constitution that human dignity is inviolable, never to be overridden, is in reaction to the experience of the Holocaust.
That means your judgment depends upon your experience.
It did.
What judgment I talk or what I feel right, it depends upon my past history.
In this case, that was very true. But, so that it's clearly true in the case of Germany, and the emphasis now on human dignity, but it raises a question that goes beyond the experience of Germany, because we here are capable of reasoning and arguing whether they were right to do this, wrong to do this. Yes?
Getting back to the point about whether attacking a symbol of democracy would, the importance attached to democracy should outweigh the importance attached to human dignity, I would say that democracy in itself is built upon the edifice of giving respect to individuals and human dignity. So, in my opinion, protecting those few individuals would have been a better way of upholding respect for human dignity and democracy in the larger picture.
All right, that's an interesting argument. So what makes democracy morally important is that it embodies respect for human dignity.
You would be destroying the very roots of democracy if you would say that merely to protect a symbol of democracy, you would go against the tenets on which democracy is based.
And so if you were, it's a powerful point, so if you were on the court, you would strike down this law. Yeah. I want to raise another case that raises a similar issue. It's a case that, actually a story by a Scandinavian writer, Ursula Le Guin. And it's a way of testing the idea of human dignity versus numbers while setting aside the issue of democracy, or at least apparently setting it aside. She tells a story, and it's an imaginary tale, of a city. She says the name of the city is Omelas. And the city is a city of perfect happiness. Have you heard of this story? There, everybody is affluent. Everybody has a strong commitment to the common good. There are public celebrations. The stock market never goes down. There are no nuclear weapons. And there is perfect happiness in this city. Except there's one further fact about this imaginary place. In one of the beautiful buildings of the city, in the basement, there is a room. And in the room of this basement, there is a child, one child, who is malnourished and neglected, and who lives her entire life in squalor in the basement. And the people of the city know this. And they know one other thing, which is, it would of course be a good thing to remove the child from the squalor and the neglect and look after her needs and feed her and clothe her and care for her. But if that were done on that day and in that moment, the city and the happiness of the city would be destroyed. We would be back to ordinary life with quarrels, with conflict, with nuclear weapons, with some people who were poor, with some who went without medical care, and where the stock market went down a lot. So the perfect happiness would be destroyed. And she finishes the story. It's a short story. That young people come and are told at a certain time in their lives of this cruel bargain, I suppose you could call it. And at first they weep about it, some of them, but then they get used to it. And they understand that these are the terms. Although she adds, there are a few people who don't get used to it, but who leave the city, and they go off through the gates, the beautiful gates of the city, and they don't come back, and we don't know where exactly they go. But maybe they know where they're going, the ones who leave this city of Omelas. That's the story. So, what do you make of this story? If you were to make it into a moral question, how many would say that it's a heavy price, but it's a price worth paying? It's one suffering, innocent child for the perfect happiness of, let's say, thousands, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, for all we know, living in the city. How many think it's a price worth paying? It's a bargain that you would take? Raise your hands. You could get rid of poverty. You could keep your hands up. You could get rid of poverty, illness, inequality, conflict, war. 2, 4, 6. About, all right, and how many would not? All right, it's not equal, but it's about 3 to 1 against. Fair enough? Something like that. It's about 3 to 1 against. About 25% say they would go for it, and about 75% reject. Here. I'm estimating. Now, let's hear first from those who would go for it, who would accept it, the 25%. Why would you say?
About it at this moment.
Yes.
So I would do that. I would, if I have a chance to do something at that moment, because I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
So you would rescue?
Yes, I would rescue.
Oh, even though it would destroy everything?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And why? Why would you do that?
Because, there's someone suffering, and I would rescue that person because that's what I can do today.
But you know that a minute later, you will ruin the happiness of the city, the well-being of the community by doing that. It's still worth it?
Because everyone's happiness is there because there's one person suffering.
Right. And?
So I would, because at this moment I can help that person, so I'd help the person at this moment.
All right, who disagrees?
Well, I think you can't put a value on virtue.
Yeah, can't put a value on virtue.
Therefore, it is the right thing to save the child.
Because virtue requires it.
Yeah, virtue
a good
requires
person, to be a good person is to rescue this child.
Exactly.
For my own self, I would do it.
Consequentially, by saving that one child, we've reduced that child's suffering at that point.
Right.
But you're creating so many more children who are suffering every day.
Right.
I mean, if you look at it in the current context as well, we have lots of poor people. But when we're, for example, creating our economic policies, it's not like we're always focusing on those poor people and trying to make them happy while depriving everyone else, right?
Right.
We are looking at the people who are more affluent as well, because, here you're looking at a thing where you want everyone to be happy, and if lesser people are happy in this case, then, if more people are happy in this case, then I think it's better in the long run.
Right. What do you say?
I just like to supplement what she's saying by saying that it's entirely impossible to expect an egalitarian society. Someone has to suffer for you to be happy. It's just not possible for everyone to be uniformly happy. Because at the end of the day, the good of the many has to outweigh the good of the few. Because you have to look at the larger picture. And
the good of the many has to come at the expense of the few. You think that's the way societies are, even though we may not like it?
There are still poor people and people who suffer in society. although we may try to alleviate their suffering, we're not going to give up everything that we have just so that we can alleviate their suffering and push ourselves into a similar cycle of suffering.
So what you're suggesting is that in the societies we inhabit now, never mind this imaginary story, we sort of make that bargain. And do you think...
Just the thought that, I am happy today because somebody else is suffering,
but
it doesn't in any way make me really happy.
Yes.
So I would rescue that child, that's all.
You would rescue, yes.
I'd like to disagree with the young woman sitting over there, because I'm against the Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill's theory of utilitarian, the greatest happiness of the greatest number, because I strongly believe that every person has a right to live and a right to the right to life, and that one person cannot be deprived of his basic rights because others are enjoying it. So I believe that numbers aren't important.
Numbers aren't important, at least they aren't everything. And so you're against utilitarianism, you're against Jeremy Bentham. You've taken this course before, it sounds like. But what do you say, what's your name?
Shiman.
To Shiman's point, that actually, in the societies that we inhabit, there is an element of this story present, that the well-being and the happiness that many people enjoy not only coincides with suffering, but you think it actually depends on some people being at the bottom? What do you say to?
I think the problem with our society is all of us aren't born with, we don't have equality of opportunity, so we aren't born at the same level. And then we aren't allowed to develop greater in life. So we're born rich or we're born poor. So we can't, I disagree with what she's saying, that we can't deprive some just to enjoy ourselves. So I don't think it's dependent at all that if some people suffer that we would enjoy our lives. So I think if everyone's born with the same opportunities and they're all equal, which is a hypothetical situation which is not going to happen, but if that's the case, then no one would suffer for anyone else's to benefit.
All right, I want to take up that suggestion. What's your name?
Siddharth. Siddharth, yeah.
I want to take up Siddharth's suggestion. Equality of opportunity. No society that exists has perfect equality of opportunity. Many aspire to it, and some have achieved it to greater or lesser degrees. This brings us to the part of our discussion about equality of opportunity and meritocracy. Suppose we were to achieve a society where there were genuine equality of opportunity, where everyone had a strong educational background, a strong family upbringing, and could start life, the race of life, if you want to use that metaphor, at the same starting place, and could compete for jobs freely and openly, without being weighted down by having been born to a poor family, let's say, or to a lower caste family. Do you think that society would be a just society? Yes? How many agree with Siddharth that if we could achieve that, that would be, in a way, a perfect meritocracy where everyone's life place would be determined by his or her merit, not his or her privilege or disadvantage? How many agree that that would be a just society? And who thinks that that would not, even that would not be a just society? Why not? Why not?
The only starting point has been set. I mean, we start off at the same point, but going forward, who knows what circumstances might play with the lives of the people. There might be an accident where a person might lose his memory, and then all the learning that he's done till that point of time, he would lose it. So he would fall back in the race. So what then? How are you going to justify that particular person?
Right, so if you bring everyone to the same starting place, and then you start the race, some people will do well and others less well.
Yeah.
let's just take some concrete examples of pay. People make different amounts of money. And their pay in the real world as it is, there are great discrepancies of pay. So take people at the very top and compare what they make with, let's say, people who make less. Take a nurse who does important work but doesn't make huge amounts of money, and who would be a figure, a successful figure? Sachin Tendulkar. Rohan gave me that. Makes what? Rohan says 50 million a year, something like that. And what does the nurse make in a year? Roughly. 10,000? 10,000 rupees? How much? $10,000 a year, you think? All right, about 10,000 a year. So is it fair, let's back up from this question about the perfect meritocracy and just look at this case. Maybe it's, you'll say, an extreme comparison, but is it fair that a great cricketer makes 50 million and that a nurse, a capable, skilled, conscientious nurse, makes 10,000? Is that fair or unfair? You should not compare. Why? The cricketer is in a different league than the nurse. That's true.
Span is very short because as long as he plays well, he gets a good advertisement. But a nurse is different. You cannot compare. You have to compare in the same league. You should not get into a different league.
Well, I wonder. What do you think?
There's always a reason to find differences between people and to base those differences, kind of give values to those differences and create those kind of divides in society. So I don't think, you might bring them all up to the same level in terms of education or in terms of, I don't know, whatever else, privilege of birth and everything else at the starting point. But after that, there's always a reason to divide people. So I don't think eventually it'll make any difference.
And is that, wait, I just want to hear what, the reason you think then that leads you to say that a perfect meritocracy would not be fair, or it would be fair?
I don't think it will be fair in any case. I just don't think it's achievable at all.
All right, what do you think? Everyone has a chance to have an even starting position.
But after that, it's their choices, it's their inclinations that get them into the fields they want to go. It's also an element of luck, but of course other things as well, ambition, character, everything that sees them to wherever they eventually end up being. So if there's a great cricketer, it's partly it's partly his capability, it's the luck that got that his game became popular at the time it did, and so on, that got him where he did. But if the nurse and he had the same educational opportunities and the same chances of following their dreams, I think that's good enough.
That's good enough, and it's good enough to justify the pay difference as fair.
Absolutely. I don't think the pay, if the nurse really wanted that kind of money, maybe she should have gone into a field which would have gotten her that kind of money.
What should she have done?
Oh, she didn't. She did it because she loved nursing.
Right.
She wants to do it.
Right.
She's obviously in the field because it engages her and she finds it useful.
Right. Okay. You disagree. Go ahead.
What if she had no option just to become a nurse? Like, what if she's born and the max she could reach in society was a nurse?
But that's the entire point of equal opportunity, right? To ensure that everyone has their own choice.
Equal opportunity doesn't really exist because society reacts to different positions in a different way. Like social value, the social value for a cricketer would be higher because he appeals to society more. A nurse would not appeal to society as much as a cricketer.
All right, so you're saying that society places different values on different kinds of contributions.
So even in a meritocracy, each position within society, because a hierarchy will always exist, each will have a different social value.
All right, well, that's actually an interesting point. Well, let's hesitate here for a minute. What's your name?
Karan.
So if we imagine this perfect meritocracy where everyone has equal educational opportunities, brought to the same starting line, some people will realize their talents to the fullest in being cricketers. Others will realize their talents to the fullest in being nurses. And you're saying, Karun, that there is a further element, which is what value society happens to place on being a great cricketer versus being a great nurse. Exactly. And that that's not the doing of the people who are running the race.
People subconsciously place people in different functions. So a cricketer would have a different function to enable society to move along. So each position has different functions. Society won't function properly on meritocracy because they're different functions filled with different people.
Well, I thought you were saying something slightly different, which is even if there is a perfect meritocracy, there can be very unequal rewards based not on the people themselves and their virtue and their character and their talents, but on what the society happens to value more and to reward more highly. And so given that difference, that's a matter of, that's one of the elements of luck that you mentioned. I mean, you could imagine the great cricketer, or you could imagine a philosophy professor. And suppose we were living at a time when neither cricket nor being a philosophy professor was valued all that highly. Suppose we lived in a hunter-gatherer society. We wouldn't be rewarded very much, neither the cricketer nor me. Other people with other talents would be rewarded more highly. Or in a warrior society, the warriors would reap the greatest rewards and recognition, not the cricketers, not the philosophers. And so we could still have the same talent, the same virtue, the same character, the same willingness to work hard, and yet, if we lived in the hunter-gatherer society or the warrior society, we might be on the bottom. We might be very inept warriors, let's say. Yeah.
Just to give another metaphor.
Yeah.
Let's say I went to business school.
Yeah.
So my class had 800 people.
Yeah.
Technically, we all sort of came from a similar background. We all paid a certain amount of money to the business school.
Right.
Got admitted.
Right.
So we were all at a certain level of, let's say, opportunity. We all had the same professors, the same classes.
Right.
When time comes for recruitment,
right,
there's a whole bunch of guys who go to investment banking and consulting for a certain reason.
Right.
There's a whole bunch of people who go into healthcare, who go into non-profits,
yeah,
who go into manufacturing. So I think it's this whole business of equality of opportunity doesn't necessarily mean equality of desire or talent or willingness. People make very conscious, logical, and emotional choices.
Right.
So people say, well, I've done this, I've got an MBA as much as anyone else, but investment banking doesn't excite me. Right. I'd rather go work for a non-profit, or I'd work for manufacturing.
Right.
So I think the point that equality of opportunity doesn't ensure equality of outcomes.
It does.
Human beings are complex. They are motivated by different
All right,
factors.
so let's grant it's a good point. Equality of opportunity does not guarantee equality of outcome. That's clear. But what does that lead you to conclude about whether equality of opportunity, or a perfect meritocracy even, defines a just society? Does that lead you to say that it does or that it doesn't?
It does.
It does because
yes,
that's all you can ask for.
That's all you can ask for, exactly.
All right. So I want to hear from someone who disagrees. Another critic. You're a critic of. Karun's one critic we've heard from. Who else? Who else disagrees with the idea that even a perfect meritocracy would be a just society? Why? Tell us why. What's wrong with this argument?
I'm uncomfortable with defining like a just society solely on the basis of. For me, the purpose of society is not necessarily that everyone gets equal opportunity. The purpose of society is nothing more on the lines of
making everyone happy. And if it turns like, it's not that a meritocracy might not be the perfect society. It's just that I don't think it would be the perfect society by its own merit.
Well, all right, then maybe we need to talk about what we mean by a just society or a perfect society or a good society even. Part of the appeal of a meritocracy where there is fair equality of opportunity. People have noticed that doesn't mean there will be equal outcomes. Part of the appeal of a meritocracy is the idea or the belief that in a society like that, people get what they deserve. That's the underlying idea. That if everyone starts at the same starting point, then, yeah, some will win the race, some will come in last, some in between, but the order of finish will reflect what people deserve. That's the appeal of a meritocracy. That one's place is earned. It's my doing, I deserve it. And what some of the critics here of meritocracy are suggesting is that that idea is a mistake. It's a mistake, I'm just reading here from what people have said, it's a mistake because there are elements of luck. What does society value? What skills, what talents? And there's the luck of who happens to have what abilities. Even if, in fact, if you imagined a race where everyone started at the same starting point, you could predict who will win if you knew who the fastest runners were.
But you can't. It's like a lottery.
It's like a lottery.
Like Thomas Alva said that it's like a lottery of life.
A lottery of life. So even if you had everyone at the same starting point, there's still an element of lottery in who wins, and that lottery has to do with who's the best runner. Well, there seem to be two sources of luck here that some people say undermine the idea that the winners deserve their winnings. One element of luck is some people are lucky to be born fast runners or to have talents. And the second element of luck is what society happens to value determines who actually wins the race, whether they value warriors or people very good at hunting and gathering or at giving philosophy lectures or at playing cricket. And that's another element of luck. A great cricketer, it's not his doing that he lives in a society that happens to prize cricket or philosophy.
One of the extreme views, if I take an extreme view of meritocracy, the issue is that one person can garner all the wealth that there is.
So there's no one win.
So only one person can win, and the rest can be deprived.
Right.
It can be a monopoly.
So in a meritocracy, that could or couldn't happen.
It can happen.
It
will happen.
And so it's like a monopoly game where...
Yes. Everybody else will get ruled out, and that one person will win.
So you don't see a meritocracy as the ideal.
It is an important aspect, but it is an aspect and not the only aspect of it.
It's not the whole of justice.
Yes.
Not the whole of a just society.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Sorry, one more element is that you might start at the same starting point and you would not mind if somebody went ahead of you who was faster. But even the one who was faster might suddenly fall down or sprint or turn an ankle. Then a just society would have to make allowances also for those who fall behind.
Right.
So just a pure meritocracy could not be a just society.
I would like to say that equal opportunity is more of a basic minimum that you need to establish a just society. So I would think that in the process of establishing a just society, you couldn't do it if you didn't have equal opportunity to start with.
But
the divisions in society and luck and all the other factors we've been talking about do need to be accounted for in the process, because just ensuring equal opportunity does not particularly mean you're ensuring a just society.
Because of these elements of luck, or for some other reason?
Because of the elements that may affect you through the course of your life, as in.
Okay, yes.
A meritocracy itself creates injustice, right?
A meritocracy, you say, creates injustice. How so?
In the sense that if you believe that everyone starts at the same level and everyone is judged on the base of merit, then some people who are better will naturally be more successful, do better, will earn more. And if it's meritocracy, everyone is starting on the same level, but there will be some up and down because some people are more successful than the other.
Right.
And invariably, it's like a filter. So whoever does better, in terms of however you want to measure it, whether it's wealth that you're measuring it by, whether it's by standing in society, whether it's by education, automatically there's a filter of whoever does better.
All right. Well, there is. All right. I want to try to draw together some of the threads from the argument, but go ahead. I know there are a lot of people who want to speak.
I'd just like to put it in context in, firstly, you're saying that if we had a just society and everybody starts at the same line, but if you look at history in terms of, if you assume that at some point everybody was equal, and what was considered as...
If you look at history, you think at one point, when was that point, by the way?
I'm just going even to the hunter-gatherer phase or something, and...
you imagine, though, and we often imagine that at one point in the distant past of human history, people started out equal. A lot of political philosophers begin with that assumption.
Okay.
Rousseau, for example, does, and John Locke and Hobbes. I'm not so you're in good company.
No,
but I'm not sure whether the lot of you are right or not. But okay, maybe that's true.
Okay, so assuming that and going ahead on those lines, in different periods of time, what society considered successful, or what was the collective objective of a society, in order to meet that, people behave in certain ways, and so in that way the objectives of the society keep changing.
Right.
So in that sense, if we consider only success as the current objective of the society, so the definition of success and putting it in the framework of a race itself, along with the meritocracy and putting it in the framework of a race, is not sufficient. I think meritocracy plus what is the framework you need, that would kind of evolve towards something just for a longer period of time.
Okay.
I was wondering actually, how much of success is actually dependent on the frame of reference. What I mean by that is success for one person may not necessarily mean success for somebody else. And how does meritocracy play in all of this? The reason why I asked this question is, I had a very, very peculiar case. So I manage a team of 11 people. A year ago, I was being told that my team is performing mediocrely. It was okay. It was not up to the mark.
Right.
Suddenly, I had a few people quitting the team. I had to bring on new people on board, and now suddenly the guys who were with my team from the beginning started to appear better than what they were. Simply because the frame of reference changed at that point of time.
Yeah.
So how does that? How do you factor in meritocracy and the frame of reference with in the argument?
All right, fair enough. We've had a lot of arguments for and against meritocracy as the definition of a just society. I want to see if I can pull some of the observations together and connect it to some of the broader philosophical questions. The 20th century philosopher John Rawls was a critic of the idea that a meritocratic society is a just society. And his criticism ran along the lines that some of you have raised. He says, as many here have said, that of course equality of opportunity is better than a society where there are some people born with impoverished life chances. Of course it's better to lift people up, to give everyone a good education, to give everyone a good start in life, to make sure that everyone starts out with good nutrition, good health, a good family, so that they can develop their talents and compete in the world. Of course, that's better than a society where people start out in different places in life. But, he says, even if we succeeded in achieving that, that would still fall short of a just society, because why do we object in the first place to making life chances depend on the accident of birth or on the good judgment you had to be born to a good family and a loving family? Well, what's wrong with that kind of society, what's wrong with a hierarchical society or a caste society, he says, is that people's life prospects should not depend on a morally arbitrary fact, the accident of birth. That's why most people favor working toward equality of opportunity, so the accident of birth doesn't govern life chances. But if you think about that same principle, you won't be satisfied, he argues, with even a society that achieves fair equality of opportunity. You won't be satisfied with the meritocracy, because where you wind up in life will still depend on morally arbitrary factors. Not the accident of birth, but the accident or the lottery of talent, ability. That too is morally arbitrary, not your doing, that you happen to be born with gifts or to be a fast runner. That's not your doing, any more than what family or caste or class you were born into is your doing. So if you're bothered by the morally arbitrary fact of the accident of birth, he argues you should be equally troubled by the morally arbitrary features of the distribution of talents and abilities. Furthermore, and this is another point that's been made, the fact that you live in a society that happens to value the talents and abilities you have in abundance, being a great cricketer, or a philosophy professor, or a business executive, or a warrior, that too is not your doing, and that too is morally arbitrary. So the same line of reasoning, he says, that leads us to reject a feudal society or a caste society or a society riven by class where one's life prospect depends on the accident of birth. The same objection, if you apply it consistently, must lead beyond even a perfect meritocracy with equality of opportunity. That's his argument. And it's in line with some of the arguments that you've offered. Now, some have challenged Rawls's view by saying, does that mean nothing about us is our own doing? Does that mean we don't really deserve where we land in life? What about our effort? What about our determination to develop our talents? What about our striving? His answer to that is, well, that may be all well and good, but even the ability and willingness to strive conscientiously, to work hard, that too is shaped by how you're brought up. That's why I asked the students in the class, how many of you are first in birth order? Because psychologists say, I don't know if this is true or not, but they say that firstborn, right, are, whether they're driven by they want to please their parents, or they're driven, that firstborn, supposedly, the psychologists say, succeed in life, make more money, I don't know, than their siblings. Now, I don't know if any of that's true. It's just what psychologists claim. I haven't looked at the studies. But that's why I asked the students, how many of you are firstborn? It's a way of testing this idea that there are all sorts of contingencies as morally arbitrary as the accident of birth. And if that's right, then it doesn't mean we need to try to level a perfectly equal society, but it does mean that the key assumption that draws many of us to the idea that a meritocracy is a perfectly just society, the idea that we deserve what we get if there's been equal opportunity. We deserve what we get if we've started at the same point in the race. If Rawls is right, if this line of reasoning is right, that assumption about what we deserve is wrong. It can't be said that we deserve everything the society has heaped upon us as rewards, even if we started out in the same starting line, he says, because the fast runners are going to win that race. And that they were blessed with speed is their good fortune, not their doing. Well, this is all just an illustration of how, well, of two things. First, how a discussion, and this was an amazingly good and articulate range of views, responding to cases, articulating the reasons and principles, and it wound up with this question about meritocracy. But it's also an illustration how a range of stories and practical cases can provide us an occasion for identifying some of the big principles that we are committed to, principles that make for a just society, or so we think, and how examining those principles and working out their moral logic can actually lead in surprising and challenging directions. So thank you for that. Thank you for the discussion. I'm happy if we have time to take a few questions, which needn't be about meritocracy at all, but on anything you want to. So are there, a comment. Go ahead.
I'd like to share a comment on the values in society. And this goes like this. It says, a society which scorns excellence in plumbing, because plumbing is a humble activity.
Yes.
And praises shoddiness in philosophy, because philosophy is an exalted activity.
Right.
In that society,
right,
neither its pipes nor its theories will hold water.
Right, all right. We didn't quite get all the way to affirmative action. But the way this discussion connects with affirmative action is this. One of the most powerful arguments against affirmative action or reservations is that it's unfair to those who deserve a place on their merits, absent the reservation, absent the help given to the disadvantaged. It's not the only objection, but it's morally one of the most powerful. And if it's true, and thank you for asking this so I could connect this, we didn't get all the way there, but you can see how we established the principles. If it's true that the people who academically have the highest test scores and the greatest merit morally deserve to be admitted, let's say, to university, then giving an advantage to people lower on the list is unfair. Unfair to them because it's not responding to who really deserves to be admitted. But if you follow Rawls's logic and the logic of those of you who challenged the principle of meritocracy as the highest definition of justice, by challenging the idea that we morally deserve our talents and our abilities to score well on the tests, then that argument about moral desert falls away and the case for affirmative action becomes very strong. So at the heart of the debate about reservations and affirmative action is an underlying assumption about whether or not those who have the highest test scores and the highest academic merit morally deserve a place such that it would be wrong to bring other factors to bear. If they don't morally deserve a place, if their candidacy is one way among others of advancing the social purpose of educational institutions, then it's reasonable to consider whether there are other reasons, qualifications, having to do with diversity and so on. But you don't get to the diversity argument until you resolve the question about whether the person with the highest academic merit deserves a place. If they do, then you can't do an injustice to them for the sake of diversity. But if that notion of desert is flawed, then everybody is offering his or her candidacy and has to be assessed based on how their admission will contribute to the common good or to the good of the university system or the society. So that's the connection between this debate about meritocracy and desert to the debate about affirmative action and reservation. All right, thank you all very much.